In today's lesson, we are going to begin Unit 6, Gerunds and Infinitives. This is part of Mr. K's Guide to Verbs. Today's lesson is Lesson 36, Gerunds and Infinitives as Direct Objects. What are the objectives for today's lesson? First, what are the 5 forms of verbs in English? What can be a direct object in English? What are the 6 patterns for gerund and infinitive objects? So, part 1 of today's lesson, the 5 forms of verbs. Hopefully this is just a review. Let's review the 5 forms of verbs in English. Every verb has these 5 forms: base, past simple, past participle, gerund, and infinitive. Verb tense, the past, present, future, continuous, simple, perfect, all of that comes from these first 3 forms. So regular verbs like study, you have study, studied, studied, studying, and to study. It's regular because the past simple and the past participle both have ed. There are a lot of irregular verbs, however, like take, took, taken, taking, and to take. It's irregular because the past simple and the past participle are not ed. They're different forms. However, the gerund and infinitive are exactly the same. And then there's the be verb. Of course, the be verb is always different. The past simple has 2 forms, was and were, and been, being, and to be. The base form is used in the following tenses: present simple, I go; third person singular, present simple, he, she, or it, when you add s, she goes. It's also the base form in the continuous tense when you add ing after the be verb, like she is going. Also, you use the base form after most helping verbs, like we can go. The past simple is just that. You only use it in the past simple tense, with time words like yesterday, last night, last week, anything like that. The past participle is used in the perfect tense, where you have plus the en, have taken, have studied, have done. And also the passive voice, which is the be verb plus the past participle, like it was done. Also, the base form in the present simple. Now, let's go over the main points of part 2 of today's lesson, the kinds of direct objects. What kinds of words and phrases can be an object? First, we have to remember what an object is. The direct object is the word or phrase that comes after an action or non-action verb. There are 3 kinds of direct objects. The first and most common is either a noun or a pronoun. Now, when I say noun, I mean an entire noun phrase. These describe who or what is receiving the action. Pronouns can be either object, demonstrative, or reflexive pronouns. For example, the children enjoyed the party. Enjoyed is the verb. Directly after the verb, you have the party. That means party is the object. You won't find anything between the main verb and the noun phrase as a general rule, if there's an object. Or, we bought these on vacation in Thailand. Bought is the verb. These is the pronoun object. Now, when I say object, demonstrative, or reflexive pronouns, what does that mean? Object pronouns are me, you, her, him, it, us, you, and them. Demonstrative pronouns, this, that, these, those. Singular and plural. The second kind of object is a noun clause. A noun clause is a clause that can go in a noun location. A noun clause object comes right after the main verb. Noun clauses are connected by that, whether or if, or a WH question word, who, what, when, where, why, how. The object includes everything connected to the verb of the noun clause. So, for example, did you know that Mr. Smith plans to retire soon? All of that is the object, including the adverb soon. He asked if this seat was taken. All of it is the object. I couldn't believe how messy their room was. Okay, the WH question word comes first. Notice that was is the end of the sentence. This is tricky for a lot of students. The third kind of object you'll find is a gerund or an infinitive phrase. Many verbs can be followed by gerunds or infinitives. This is when you put a verb after the main verb. The object includes everything connected to the gerund or infinitive. For example, playing is the gerund, but the entire object is playing a musical instrument. The object includes the object of the gerund. Or, to walk in the park for an hour. All of it, to walk in the park for an hour, is the object. The object includes the prepositional phrases because they describe walk. Walk in the park, walk for an hour. Unfortunately, there are really no rules to help decide when to use which. You just have to memorize. For example, we've decided you can only use an infinitive, but enjoy you can only use a gerund. So Bob and Amy decided to go to Thailand for their honeymoon because they enjoy traveling in Southeast Asia. In this sentence, admit and deny must be followed by a gerund. The child admitted breaking the window, but he denied eating all of the ice cream. Infinitives wouldn't work. Now let's go over the main points of part 3. This is the most important part of today's lesson, the 6 patterns for gerund and infinitive objects. Verbs can be divided into these 6 groups. Often the main verb is followed by a second verb. The second verb must be either a gerund or an infinitive. And there are 6 patterns for gerund or infinitive objects. The first group is gerund only. Some verbs must be followed by the gerund form of a verb. For example, we enjoyed having friends over for dinner last night. What time will you finish making the PowerPoint slides? Enjoyed and finish are two examples of group 1 verbs. Okay, other common pattern 1 verbs you see here: admit, appreciate, dislike, feel like, miss, quit. The second pattern is infinitive only. Some verbs can only be followed by the infinitive form of a verb. Almost always it must be a full infinitive with to. Explain more about this later. Only help can be followed by a bare infinitive without to. With help, you have two choices. With help, to is optional. For example, I learned to swim when I was 4 years old. Could you help clean up the room? Could you help to clean up the room? Again, help is the only one where to is optional. Other common pattern 2 verbs include decide, can't afford, hope, offer, plan, promise. Some verbs fall into the third category, gerund or infinitive, same. Some verbs can be followed by either a gerund or an infinitive, and the meaning is exactly the same, whatever you want, as a general rule. Like, Skylar loves to play sports, Skylar loves playing sports. It started to rain an hour ago, it started raining an hour ago. They're both correct, same meaning. However, you should avoid putting to and ing back to back. I should say you should avoid to back to back or ing back to back. For example, it is starting to rain is a much better choice than it is starting raining. Because starting also ends with ing, it is much better to have the infinitive when you have a choice. Or it is going to start raining is much better than it is going to start to rain. To start already has to, so the gerund is better than the infinitive. This rule only works for pattern 3 verbs when you have a choice. All the others, if you have to put ing back to back or to back to back, you gotta do what you gotta do. Other common pattern 3 verbs: begin, can't stand, continue, like, love, prefer. Pattern 4, you have a choice gerund or infinitive, but the meaning changes depending on which one you use. This is a very small group, so just remember these few things. Remember and forget are the most common in this group. Use an infinitive to talk about whether something happened or not. Most of the time, you will use an infinitive. Did you remember to lock the door? Did you do it? Oops, I forgot to lock the door. I didn't do it. Don't forget to lock the door. A reminder to do it. Use a gerund to talk about memories, things that happened in the past. You did it, and now you're talking about the memory. Another one is try. This is a bit trickier. Use an infinitive when you aren't sure if you can or not. Use an infinitive after tried to show that you were unsuccessful. For example, I tried to call you last night, but you didn't answer the phone. I was unsuccessful. I will try to come to your party, but I can't promise. Use a gerund to talk about doing something for the first time, a new experience. Or use a gerund to suggest a solution to a problem. I tried scuba diving on my trip to Bali, my first time. Why don't you try hitting it with a hammer? That's my suggestion on how to fix the problem. The fifth pattern is someone to do or something to happen. Some verbs are followed by infinitives, but they must have a noun or pronoun between the main verb and the infinitive. This is the person who will do the action. This is the thing that will happen. My parents allowed me to get my driver's license when I was 16. We invited our friends to join us on our weekend trip. Other common pattern 5 verbs that must have a noun or pronoun in the middle: advise, cause, forbid, force, help, hire, remind, require, teach, and tell. Now, advise is the only verb that jumps groups. It can also be followed by a gerund like suggest or recommend. I advise you to take a foreign language next year. I advise taking a foreign language next year. However, you cannot use suggest with, for example, I suggest you to take a foreign language. No. I recommend you to take it. No. Only advise. The final pattern is actually a double pattern: to do and someone to do. Some verbs have these two patterns. They can be followed by just an infinitive, or they can have a noun or pronoun between the main verb and the infinitive. For example, I need to get a new computer. Or, I need you to send this document to the customer. When there is just an infinitive, the subject of the sentence will do the action. When there is a noun in the middle, that person will do the action. For example, we had to pay to go into the zoo. We paid and we went into the zoo. We paid our son to wash the car. We will pay our son. He will wash the car. Other common pattern 6 verbs: ask, choose, expect, want, and would. Finally, let's talk a little bit about bare infinitives. A full infinitive is to plus the base form of a verb. A bare infinitive is the base form of a verb without to. Almost always use the full infinitive with to. Help is the only time that to is optional. However, there are two common situations in which the bare infinitive is needed. Some causative verbs. For example, Skylar's parents made him go. This is a bare infinitive. Or, Kai let his roommate borrow his sweater. Borrow is a bare infinitive with let. Or, the manager had Sarah clean up the spill in aisle 6. Clean up is a bare infinitive. Notice that made and had are clearly in the past tense. Let is also in the past tense. But go, borrow, and clean up look like the base form. Also, verbs of perception. These are verbs that go with your eyes, ears, nose, mouth, or hands.